Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books with me, Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about all of life through the prism of food. And this week I'm with Ashia Ismail Singer to talk about one of my favourite subjects, food identity, and how food culture travels across borders.
You can mix things together, you know, it doesn't have to be all Indian. You can have a little bit of spice and a little bit of kiwi.
Her books, Ashia's Table and Saffron, Swirls and Cardamon Dust, and her third, The Laden Table, which comes out in April, are all about her food culture. Born in India, brought up in Malawi and the UK, and fused with the best of New Zealand. I began by asking her about her publishing story.
It took me quite a while, actually. I first started getting my story out there to all the publishers from about 2012 when we came back from the UK to New Zealand. And the first cookbook didn't get published till 2018. So it was a real struggle. Yeah.
So tell us about that, Ashia. Come on, because I talk to a lot of people. You know, I do food writing retreats. A lot of people in my kind of community are very interested in how to cook a book.
Yes.
How to get a book published. So come on, what happened? First of all, why did you so desperately want to tell that story? And why did it take you so long? And what kept you going during that time?
My tenacity kept me going. But and just the fact that I didn't want to give up. But I think one of the reasons that I wanted to tell my story was I kind of felt that as an immigrant, so, you know, I was born and brought up in Africa and then moved to the UK and then came to New Zealand. I kind of felt like I had a story to share and that there are so many immigrants all around the world who kind of feel like that, you know. They're away from what they know as home, and they want to share that story. And I kind of felt that my story was just that little bit special, that I just wanted to share that.
Can you break that down, Ashia, what that was? Because that's what we do at the food writing retreats. You know, everybody says, oh, I want to write a book of my recipes or my mum's recipes or my grandmother's recipes, or I feel I've got an interesting story to tell. And we spent a lot of time drilling down really what the essence of that story was. And presumably over that period of time, you really did nail it. What did you really come up with? What was that story?
So my story, what I really wanted to share with people is that yes, it's an immigrant's cuisine, but it gets not watered down, but it develops its own sense of style as it moves geography and boundaries, but it still remains very much my cuisine. So it's ended up being a blend of East and West.
And we know a lot of stories like that. Gerd Loyal did, I think, the best version of it last year with Mother Tongue, you know, where he's talking about the cultural hybridity. It is his food. He's a queer man born in Leicester of Indian parents who grew up in India, came to Leicester in their 20s. He was born and brought up in Leicester and now lives in Hackney, living very much the queer London life.
Yes.
All of that is in his food.
Yes.
So it's not just Indian food with, you know, through the British prism. It's all of that. And it's intergenerational as well. So yours, from Malawi to the UK to New Zealand, which has its own amazing food culture,
yes,
has a totally different flavour. Again, but is essentially the same story as Gerd's and Vashi Rose and Ravinder Bogle's and, you know, all these wonderful food writers who we love to read.
Yes.
So in that canon, very clearly, what does the Malawi bit add and what does the New Zealand bit add and what does the U bit add?
Yeah, look, there's a whole different range. And I think for me, the in essence, it is me on a plate, basically, because growing up, Mum wouldn't just cook Indian meals. So Mum was also born in Africa. She was born in Malawi. It was my grandparents that moved from India in the sort of late 30s, early 40s. And I've actually never been to India. That's on the bucket list. But I think for me, the essence of my story was that Mum cooked East and West before fusion was a thing. So, growing up in the 70s, we would, she would make spicy shepherd's pie. And this was just her, she'd gone to school in Malawi, but she hadn't been abroad. But she used to get these magazines from my dad's shop, and she used to flick through those, and it was just her way of experimenting. And I think that's kind of what really got me going about bringing the East and West together. I guess the real thing about growing up in Malawi was that everything was fresh and everything was, there was no packet food. So sweet corn was grown, in the back garden. We had a chicken coop. We had a couple of goats in there. So that was the Malawi part. All immigrants, when they travel somewhere, they take their food with them and they take their spices with them. And I guess that's what happened with us as well.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you came to the UK, you were a young teenager and, you bumped into racism in a way that you just hadn't experienced before. Why would you?
No.
And I imagine that, those spices and those flavors and the smells of home played two different roles. On the one hand, I remember Ashia telling me that she hated taking her lunchbox on school trips because they smelled.
We were the same.
And she just hated being different. You just want to blend in. You don't want to be noticed. So those comfort foods of home, the smells of home, are absolutely what you do not want to take to school. So, how did that play out into your kind of understanding of who you were through your food?
Yes. Look, that came a lot later. I think because I'm a twin and my twin and I were the oldest of four girls, and we were 16 when we arrived in the UK. My two younger sisters were 8 and 6. And we, like you said, we just wanted to blend in. We didn't want to wear Indian clothes. We didn't want to, as teenagers, Mum used to make us roti rolls for lunch. And I didn't want to take that to school. I wanted to have sandwiches like everybody else. But it was only later in life that, and when I came to New Zealand, that I realized that actually this is what makes me different. But actually, difference is good. Yeah. Why am I embarrassed to be who I am?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of your food moments. Let's go to your first one, which is the masala baked beans. What a great mashup. Tell us about that.
Oh, just amazing. Look, so baked beans, we're in the UK and Mum's sort of obviously buying different things from the supermarkets. And she finds, these tins of baked beans and, baked beans are nice, but they kind of taste a bit bland. So here she is. And I think quite a few Indian families do that now. Fried off some onions and till they're golden, pop the baked beans in, the whole tin, and then added some, chili powder, some garam masala, bit of pepper. Oh my God, I do not eat beans any other way.
Actually, I don't eat baked beans, but I would eat those baked beans.
Oh my God, they are so good.
And adding an egg to them. Then you've got huevos rancheros. It's just, it's so obvious,
just amazing. Yeah, so amazing.
But that fusion, it's very much what happened in New Zealand and even more so in Australia. Leading to those two countries having the best food in the world, probably by the end of the 1990s. And I wrote a book about Australian food. And I went to New Zealand to write part of it. And that was in 1998. It was when, Australia was absolutely at the top of its tree. But the food in both New Zealand and Australia, because of those waves of immigration, the Greeks, the Italians, the Vietnamese boat people, put all that together and call it fusion. It was sensational, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, it's amazing. I loved going out here. I'm talking when I first arrived here, I'd never been to brunch, A brunch was a big thing here. I'd never had muffins. they made the most amazing blueberry muffins in cafes and things. And the food scene, great restaurants, great chefs that are just doing just the most amazing stuff.
I mean, let's talk about New Zealand through your second food moment, the upside down Tamarillo cake, because New Zealand itself is quite sort of parochial. It always reminded me of 1950s Britain, but the food scene is more San Francisco, isn't it? They don't have a stable food culture like we don't here, so we can absorb all the different immigrant cultural ideas and flavors, as Australia did as well. I mean, that's what makes it so rich. So take the upside down Tamarillo cake, for example. Tell us how that ended up in your book through the prism of all that you are.
Yeah, when I first arrived here, Tamarillos were a fruit that I wasn't familiar with. Obviously, originally from South America, it's become quite popular in the Southern Hemisphere. I first had it as a chutney. And the great thing about tamarillos is you can use them as a savory and a sweet. So, you can use them as both. The color is just vibrant. It's like a deep maroon. It's absolutely stunning. These beautiful tamarillos, I decided to put them in my second cookbook, Saffron, Swirls, and Cardamon Dust. It's beautiful because what you do is you halve the tamarillos, you put them on the base with some butter and sugar, and you add the cake mixture on top. You bake it, turn it upside down, and oh my God, the color and the taste is just stunning. It's got a bit of a tartness, but it's also quite sweet. And there's also some spice in there as well in the cake. So just kind of mixed that whole, East and West.
So would that be something that, for example, that you would cook in one of your cooking classes?
Yes. I mean, it just to show people that you can mix things together, it doesn't have to be all Indian. You can have a little bit of spice and a little bit of kiwi. I suppose tamarillos here are sort of classed as a Kiwi thing.
So let's go back to the kind of the roots of it all. Your parents and your grandparents. So you grew up in Malawi. Your parents were Memon Muslims, though, and they came from Gujarat. And
yes.
Tell us a little bit about this. I don't know very much about the Memon Muslims, apart from what you say. They're merchant traders, and business and philanthropy was very much part of the religion. How did that inform the kind of food that you were cooking and feeding people?
Yes. So my grandparents moved from India in the 1930s, late 1930s, early 40s, from Gujarat. The food in Gujarat was very much influenced by the Persians that came there. And so things like saffron and rosewater, pistachios and all that kind of stuff was very much drawn into this Gujarati way of cooking. So we use all those things in our food now. So, saffron is used quite a lot in sort of savory and sweet dishes. Rosewater again in sweet dishes, in milkshakes in Ramadan and things like that. So some of that Persian influence has really come into the Indian side of things. Yeah. And all those recipes that were brought over from my grandmother's was all kind of handed down. Things were never written, but just sort of you sort of watched your grandmothers, you watched your aunts, and you just did what they did, and then developed your own sense of doing things.
Yeah. And it was very much a middle class kind of cuisine, wasn't it? There were lots of parties and feastings and feeding lots and lots and lots of people. And your third food moment is the chicken biryani from Ashia's Table. This is your mum's biryani. And it is about feeding the hundreds, isn't it?
Yes.
Tell us about this one.
Yes. So my mum's chicken biryani, it's my sort of, if I was on an island and what would be my, dish that I would go to, this would be it. It's my soul food. And I have memories of mum cooking this dish. She wouldn't do this on a regular basis, but she did do it. She'd cook, she was cooking for a party of about 100, making this amazing biryani for 100 people. And she can't have been more than in her sort of mid-30s. And I was just in awe of this, her cooking for so many people. But what I love about my mum's biryani, and I think that's what is in the book, is just the layers of beautiful rice and curry and the saffron
and rice, fried
potatoes. Fried potatoes, and oh my God, it's just divine.
It is one of those recipes that, you can taste, because probably everybody's had a biryani in their lives.
Of some sort.
You talk about the food coming from celebrations. There's a lot in your book, Ashia's Table in particular, about Eid, for example, and weddings and big feasts. It's very much part of the Indian culture to feed masses and masses of people. We're just coming up to Ramadan. And, it feels like one of those wonderfully rich cultural traditions that millions and millions of people around the world share. And those of us who don't are completely out of it, because it is a very private experience. Can you give us a little glimpse into what happens during Ramadan and give us some idea of the feasting as well as the fasting?
Sure. So Ramadan, it's basically a month of fasting during the daylight hours. So you wouldn't eat anything, from dawn to dusk. And then at dusk, you would break your fast, usually with dates. And then you would do your prayers, and then you would go and feast with the family. But you wouldn't. I guess if it was a weekend, we'd invite family over and we'd have a big sort of a dinner together. If it was just the four of us at home, we'd just have something simple. So it wouldn't be overeating or anything like that. It would just be a nice, simple, we'd have something to break our fast with. So something like a samosa or, onion bhajis or something like that. And then we'd have a lovely meal afterwards.
But that's very much the New Zealand tradition, or the kind of the immigrant tradition, isn't it? I mean,
yes,
back in the homeland, or if you were living even in Leicester,
yes,
you that wouldn't be the story, would it? You'd have loads of people over.
Yes,
so
exactly.
It is about being apart from your community that has created this kind of weird idea. I bet your parents find that very strange, that you should be just having four of you.
Yes, because Mum, when we were living in the UK, we'd all go around to Mum's, and there'd be, me and my family, and my sister would be there with her family, and, in fact, both of my sisters would be there. So it would be a big affair. But that wouldn't happen every single day, because obviously, everybody's got to work. And so things change, I think, in the way, in modern day sort of times when everybody's got to work and school and all that kind of stuff. But in the weekends, we would definitely celebrate, together and break our fast together. But actually, it's changing a lot, because even in London now, I follow pages where people are, sort of Muslims are inviting other, faiths to come and do, iftar together at the break of the fast at the end of the day, which is just lovely.
So that's really lovely that people from different faiths should come and join that. How does it work on a kind of cross-religion basis?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as Muslims, we are just so open to people joining in and finding out a little bit more about our faith. So it's not something that we would ever say, no, you can't do that. We're open about our religion. We're open about what we do, and we love sharing it.
And you love sharing food at weddings. Weddings are the quintessential Indian feast, aren't there? And this is your final food moment, the carrot halva with mascarpone. The mascarpone, I'm sure, isn't a particularly Indian ingredient. No. So this is a little fusion again. Why did you choose this one?
The carrot halva with mascarpone is this is from Ashia's Table. It is one of my absolute favorite desserts. Again, I have memories of eating this at weddings and special occasions. We had it actually at my youngest sister's wedding just before we left to come back to New Zealand about 13 years ago. So it's basically cooking grated carrot in milk and saffron, cardamom until all the liquids evaporated. And then you add the butter and the sugar and you caramelize it. And then once that's all caramelized and absolutely just amazing, you serve it. You can either serve it with ice cream, but I decided to just give it a bit more of a twist and serve it with mascarpone, which is just lovely. Then you can add nuts or silver leaf, edible silver leaf on there as well. Some people put raisins in the mix, but I just like the pure carrot. I just think it's just stunning.
Is there a fear of diluting the culture too much through fusing all these different food influences that actually could threaten a culture?
To be honest, I don't think so, because I just think that spices for me play an integral part in the way I cook, and whether I westernize a dish slightly, but I'm still using the spice. But I understand what you're saying, losing the authenticity of the dish or the recipes.
I'm not sure that it is. I think because we talk a lot about authenticity on this show, and what we talked about before with Gerd Loyal and Ravinder and Avashi, they've all taken their stories and put them through their food. We are very clear that authenticity is about actually just being yourself. What I mean is, I suppose in a time of, again, political turmoil, we started with your grandparents leaving Gujarat because of the political turmoil, the difference between the Muslims and the Hindus. That's what that split was what drove your grandparents to Malawi. There's always political tensions,
yes,
but there are particularly religious tensions at the moment, and with the rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and, all sorts of clashes between ideologies and religions, food gives us an opportunity to break bread together and to have a sense of some kind of stability. Is that true? Or is it about the dilution? Is it about the kind of the sharing of the greatness of the cardamom pod across all these different food cultures that binds us?
Yeah, I totally think so. I think food really is the glue that holds people together. I think food brings cultures together. It brings different people from different religions together. I think sharing food, sharing our culture with other people is just so important, especially with the way the world is at the moment. I think the blending of cultures just makes us a big global community and just makes the world a better place.
Thanks for listening. Do head to my Substack for extra bites from Ashia with recipes from her food moments. And I'll see you next week.